The voluntary sector is well placed to gather the views of our client groups to inform decisions about what works and what people on the ground actually want to see delivered. We give support for local initiatives such as Neighbourhood Watch, Streets Safety Wardens. I run an alcohol service, and one of the things we do is we help train local street pastors, for example. So we all, as various voluntary organisations, work with the community to build stronger systems. And then we get involved in targeted campaigns, hate crime prevention, alcohol and domestic abuse around peak periods. We're there, we're visible, and we're working with our partner agencies. Why? That's a good question. The voluntary sector has provided support for many years to those who do not engage with what has been nicely put here, the system. Those who don't get engaged with statutory sector services, but those who do need additional support provided by specialist providers. Most of our agencies over the years have been set up in response to an identified need. We don't just establish because we think that might be something nice to do. We recognise that there's a need, or others recognise there's a need, and a group is established. Our incentive is usually driven by community well-being, rather than that there is a statutory requirement to deliver what we deliver. So we're there, if you like, in between the gaps that the statutory sector service and other services are able to provide. But those are nonetheless vital services. Get the thumbs on it. Why do we need to continue this support? We all know, particularly in the current climate, we've got reducing budgets that the statutory partners have. We've got reducing numbers within the police. Because of our diversity, we can work right across crime-related issues, including antisocial behaviour, burglary, reducing reoffending, gangs, homelessness, drugs and alcohol, hate crimes and domestic violence. We work together in a lot of these areas, and it's the flexibility and approach that we have. Most of us also use trained volunteers, so we can add value to what we're doing. And a lot of the agencies work very closely within their communities. So again, it's stressing that we understand what's needed locally and what works. And we've got, Staffordshire Stoke and Trent is big geography. What works in one locality might not work in another locality. There's slightly different needs. We provide value for money. We'll continue to work with statutory partners to consult with victims and the wider community, including vulnerable and underrepresented groups. Offending behaviour will be linked to a number of social and health factors. So it's not just those groups that are working, obviously, with the criminal justice title. So not just those that are working with victims of crime, working with, say, alcohol, domestic abuse, but also if we look at mental health issues, wider social issues. Because we're independent, we can be flexible and responsive in a way that other organisations might find difficult. So when we do listen to our clients, we can adapt our services to meet those changing needs. Our approach means we're able to achieve value for money in providing high quality services that meet the needs of a wide range of different communities. And as I've sort of pointed out, those needs change over time, depending on the circumstances and the particular community people are in. We understand what works with victims as well as offenders. Our experience extends to victims, offenders, and we can provide evidence of the effect of different approaches for both groups. It's important for our sector and for those funding us and those working with us that we can demonstrate the change or the impact of what we do. Actually, if we're able to highlight those successes, then hopefully what we're also doing is encouraging other people to seek help earlier. Some of our most successful work involves bringing victims and offenders together, which can result in significant benefit for both parties. So, for the future, and why we're here today, we're looking forward to working closely with the Police and Crime Commissioner to make Staffordshire Stoke and Trent a safe place to live. But it's about, the whole of today is about partnership. It's about, we need to get involved as a sector, we need to support this initiative, and And we need to make sure that we are listened to and part of the decision making that takes place. And I will stop now because we need the time.
Kathy, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kathy. Very informative, and I think paints the picture for today's debate. Before we start the questions, though, I'd just like to perhaps ask the candidates just spend a few minutes introducing themselves so you can know a little bit more about them. So, Joy.
Thank you very much for the opportunity of us coming to speak to you today. I'm really glad to see you all. There's quite a few faces that I've known over several years and some more newer faces rather than met more recently. I was going to give you quite a few pages here on all about me, how I grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, leaving school in the 70s and how, quite funny, the present financial situation in the country feels very similar to then. I remember the power course and having to go out to work at that time and not go straight into education because of helping support the family. We seem to have gone backwards in time a little bit with that. I went back as a mature student in the 90s and gave HNCs in business and finance and that sort of things. I was going to talk to you about trade union works because I've always helped people. I helped start families up in our area working along with they would watch when we had antisocial behaviour problems, which later became a very good rent association area. My mother still chairs that rent association. She's 81, she's fantastic, can't keep her down, don't know this. But I'm not going to go through all this. What I'm going to tell you is about, as a counsellor and as a wife to a husband who actually worked a long time in your sector, because I know what it's like with 3-year or even less contracting. I know from talking to partners recently that some places, some of you have only got 1 year contracting, and that, when we're working with partners, we want true partnership working, can't be right. My husband worked for North Staffordshire Racial Equality Council until its demise, so I really do understand the problems and issues that you all face with all the hate crimes, of any sort. I understand about your financing, I understand about the problems about getting financing, especially at this time, from other areas of support we need that has been cut from councils. So I do have a big background in all that. The background I have, I've always been victim-centric anyway, and I've always stood up for people. That's why I joined the union, that's why I became a councillor. I've held various roles on the council, including working actually on violence in the North of the counties, you're all aware, has been terrible in recent years. The police have been serious violence, so bad that we had to task and finish groups and try to work with other partners to get that down, along with other partners in that area. It has been going down, still wrong, but it is working. Also led on things like policies to do with procurement and that sort of thing, because Stoke-on-Trent Council was in the news for the wrong things around procurement policies, and taking that opportunity and working with the Chambers of Commerce and VAST amongst others to try and get third sector involvement in the contracting, the smaller contracts and maybe the larger contracts with Stoke-on-Trent Council. So it isn't just that Stoke-on-Trent Council area people can get jobs. We wanted to widen it out into those people that were surrounding the area to bring in jobs, money, support, and anything else that you will provide as well. So I can talk to you later about anything you want to know about me and my wider background, but in conclusion, I'm grounded in the community, I live in the community, I understand the voluntary sector. Like many of you, probably I'm the Vice Chair of School Governors, I'm on community group boards. I understand the problems you have, I understand your needs, and you need someone who understands your problems. I feel I am that candidate, whether it's on the work I've done in the 10 years on the City Council or as a resident of the city. I have always supported the voluntary sector and will continue to support and help the voluntary sector if I'm elected to the PCC. person can do this job by themselves. They need all of you plus more. Thank you.
Joy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I won't repeat all that Joy has said about thank you for coming tonight. It's a really good opportunity to highlight this new role. I'm Matthew Ellis. I've got a background in business. I was fortunate to set up my own business at 19 years old. It nearly failed through crime. It was in sports retail, and I went through a very significant early stage of having lorries and armed robberies and all sorts, which nearly finished me off. Fortunately, we got through it, and I was lucky enough to sell my business at 37 and found myself with life choices. And the choice I made wasn't to go to Mark Beach, it was to get involved in local politics, do stuff in the community, and the last 7 years that I've been doing this have been the best 7 years I've had. It's been absolutely fascinating, a mixture of frustration, a mixture of jubilation. It really has been an interesting time looking at how we can improve the public sector. The last 3 years, I've been responsible for social care in Staffordshire. And I inherited a difficult situation, I think it's fair to say, in social care. And over the last 3 years, I've tried very hard and succeeded in many areas to break down the fragmented services which are right across the public sector, the things that don't join up, the communication systems that don't communicate, the insular look that so many different organisations in the public sector have, rather than looking at the wider picture and working together, all of the things that every person in this room will know about. And I think we've been quite successful doing that. I remember 2.5 years ago, I suggested that we need to start bringing social care and the health sector much closer together. So I had the idea of bringing together a trust, so they all went into one organisation. And everybody said, no chance, it can't be done. Well, it was launched last April, a £500 million new organisation which is delivering services that are markedly better than they were. Not right yet, markedly better than they were, and has saved a considerable amount of money. So my fundamentals for doing what I do now is very based in what everybody's life is about. It's getting the very best value for money for what we do. My big difference between Joy and myself is that I think we've got some big challenges financially, but I'm also absolutely convinced that we can do more in the public sector efficiently. I think we can absorb many of the reductions in budget that we've got. But it's not you guys that are to blame for this issue, it's the public sector. It doesn't fit together as well as it should. In policing, the criminal justice system, and the courts, and the police service itself don't fit together well. That causes issues for victim support organisations and the other support organisations in the policing and the community safety area. I think what my task is, if I'm successful, is to do exactly what I've done over the last 3 years in health. And that is to start breaking down these barriers and getting the different bodies to work much more collaboratively, and where possible, really start to bring budgets together. I'm absolutely adamant that if I bring the business approach, the experience that I've had, together with my utter passion for public service, I think we can produce a police service and a criminal justice system which is more effective, less expensive to run, and releases more money to the community sector to carry out the roles that you do.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll start with the questions now, and using a bit of chairman's privilege here, I'm going to ask the first one for the simple reason that we quite often are not very good at blowing our own trumpet. And there's a lot of people sitting in the audience today who've worked and I've witnessed in terms of working with victims and voluntary work. And it's important, I think, that work is recognised. And so at the risk of embarrassing people in the audience today, I can say there is a lot of people out there who do good work and represent organisations and people in the voluntary sector. And I just wonder, as a Police and Crime Commissioner, how do you see the role of the voluntary sector and the third sector in supporting communities and those who've been victims of crime? Perhaps yourself, first.
Yeah, sure. It's been a really interesting few weeks for me. Clearly, I've had a lot to do with the voluntary sector in my current role, but I've met all never met before over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and the constant thread for me is that you're doing a tremendous job in quite difficult circumstances. I'm not just talking about London, I'll just make clear at this point. It may well be the only thing I agree with Joy on today, but this idea that when you get a new contract, you have to start your exit strategy the day after you get it is utter nonsense. It is just crazy. And my message to commissioners, certainly in the area that I'm responsible for at the moment, is if you are so concerned that the organisation cannot be trusted for more than a year or 2 years, why give them the contract? Let's actually give organisations a chance to develop the services that they're there to deliver. So I'm in total agreement with Joy. I think we should be looking at nothing less than 3 years, and ideally 5 years, albeit with the safeguards there that make sure that if the service is not being delivered in the way that it should be, or the service is failing, then there are mechanisms there to correct that. But I think the voluntary sector is hugely important for a number of reasons. One, because it is that much closer to the communities that it actually serves. 2, because you do things in a different way to the way the statutory sector quite often does them. And 3, because the very ethos of the voluntary sector means that you have a passion for it. That's not saying that workers in the statutory sector don't. I just think you do it differently. The organisations I've visited this last few weeks, the common thread between all of them, and certainly as far as the police are concerned, is how difficult it is to get information. How things are always made so much more difficult because of the way the police work. So I'm a firm believer that the police need to start working towards the citizen in the street rather than the citizen actually being expected to work themselves around the system that's in place now. So my vision for the future is to do very much what we've done in social care and health, which is to start to try and shift the focus, particularly onto the victims of crime, because actually all of this is about the victims of crime, but much, much wider than that, start to make sure that different parts of the criminal justice system work together closer, and that may well involve a large pair of boots and kicking down doors, just as I've done in health and social care these last 3 years, because the PCC is a very influential role, it's limited in power. So this is about diplomacy, it's about being really clear and treating individuals as consumers and customers and really starting to modernise the services within the criminal justice system to meet the year 2012 expectations. And that's what I intend to do.
Thank you. The voluntary sector have a crucial role to play in working with our communities and working with the victims of crime. You all work within our community safety groups, and I believe that if something isn't broken, then why mend it? On that basis, other than working with you to try to help find ways of supporting you further and consulting with you, I would not interfere in the present arrangements. You all play a crucial role in community safety, where the police and council officers sometimes struggle to engage with the vulnerable. A lot of people won't talk to anybody that remotely looks like they're in any sort of uniform, but they will talk to you. We see them every day around town, especially town centres. They'll run a mile because he's wearing a uniform, but they'll talk to you. To try and help find ways to where the police and council officers sometimes struggle to engage with the vulnerable and socially excluded, you succeed. You work at the grassroots level. You have the trust of the community. You have the links already in place with volunteers fighting substance misuse, preventing youth crime, supporting the victims of domestic abuse, and I say abuse, not just violence, because to be quite honest, a broken bone mends, scars on the mind take an awful long time to go if ever, and antisocial behaviour. You have a long history of helping to provide services to reduce crime, and you have years of evidence to show what works best. That will be invaluable to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Across all of you are the skills and experience of working in areas such as hate crime, domestic abuse, drug and alcohol misuse, the homeless, repeat offenders, and antisocial behaviour. I see you as key partners in helping to bring about safer communities in Staffordshire. And if anybody wants me to talk more detail with individual groups on how, I'll be your afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joy. I want to hand over to some questions from the floor.
Good morning. I chair street pastors in Stafford, and the police are continually showing their appreciation for the street pastors initiative in the town. I wondered what the candidates thought of that initiative, what commitment they would give to ensure that the street pastors scheme, not just in Stafford but across the county, goes from strength to strength. Thank you.
I'm still switched on. Yes, John, fantastic scheme. We've had in Stoke a few years ago. We started off with the night church and then joined up with the street pastors. Absolutely fantastic job. It's the word prevent. When you speak to victims of crime, and I think the victims of crime people will be able to confirm this, the one thing that the victims want to do is to prevent another crime happening again. So anything you do to prevent anybody falling the victim to any sort of crime, like you do on a regular basis, you only have to see the young girls especially when they're worst aware on a Saturday night and see the vital work you do in making sure that water, flip-flops, little spiky tops in handy to give out, oatmeal, flapjacks to soak up the extra alcohol, lots of water, just to make sure people get home safely. So on that basis, I see you as a key player. I really do, a key player.
Just a quick comment on Joy's comment before about not interfering. I will interfere because I think your life is made much more difficult by the bureaucracy that you hit within many of the statutory organisations. I've had time with victim support recently, and the difficulties that they have in simply getting information out of the police and out of the different agencies, I think is entirely fixable. So I will not pledge to not interfere because I think you can do more if you were given the opportunity to do more and didn't have so many hurdles. I think the public sector is very, very good at making life difficult for voluntary groups and community sector. Just on this issue, yes, I don't know the scheme well. I'm due out, I think, to Lloyd Cook in a couple of weeks' time in Stoke to have a look at the work that's being done there. On face it, it sounds tremendous. It really does sound as if it helps people to get back safely. I would also just say, though, that I would like to go one step further back than that and try and do some more work on avoiding people getting into quite the state they're getting into in the first place. I think that the way that we will deal with some of the social challenges that we have is not to simply maintain them by throwing more police as an issue or throwing more massive resources as an issue, but try and really start to get to the hub of it, to understand what is causing the issue. In this particular case, with binge drinking and the drinking yourself into oblivion, clearly that is a very, very difficult generational cultural issue to deal with. But my message today is ever so simple. I want to be absolutely sure that the money that goes to community groups and voluntary sector organisations is being well spent. I think that we need to help you to demonstrate the fact that things are being well spent more than perhaps is done at the moment. That's not because it's not being well spent. I just think it's sometimes difficult to actually demonstrate that it is. And I'm very, very simple when it comes to this. If something works, my view, and it's been for the last 3 years in what I do now, is bottom-up ideas quite often work the best. I've been surrounded for some time with people who either did the job 20 years ago and still think they know what it's about, and will be very happy to give me advice which is 20 years out of date, or actually who have got no understanding of what you do or what it's like on the front line, but still have a view about how it should be done. It's the frontline workers, it's people who do it every day of their life, which come up with the best ideas. I've got a track record of listening to people on the front line and turning their views into working principles and working strategies. So the answer is yes. If what you do is proven to work, if what you do is proven to fit within the wider system and the approach of earlier intervention, you'll have absolute support from me. If it's not, then we'll either help you to find out whether you're just not proving that fact, or we'll have to talk some more.
Thank you, Matthew. We've now got Di Litchfield from Stafford District Volunteer Service somewhere. You've got the microphone.
I've got the microphone. Hi, Joy, Matthew. The role of PCC is elected and is therefore representative of the communities that we all serve and work within. If the answer and the solution to creating safer communities, which we all believe lies within those communities themselves, how do you plan to engage with those parts of the community that currently don't have a voice?
Yeah, sure. I think we've got to do smart engagement. I think the public sector is full of engagement, which is simply rubber stamping. It does so much engagement, doesn't join anything together, and it also appears to me, certainly 3 years ago, I stopped engagement, which was done just so you could tick the box to say you've engaged. I think there's a wealth of information out there, but we need to manage it better. We need to do engagement because we want to know the information, rather than simply because we want to tick the box. So how we do that, I think, is a very big question. I think that the size of Staffordshire, the diversity of Staffordshire, means that it absolutely has to be localised. I think we need to do more continuous engagement rather than spot events. The public sector, again, is very, very good at setting up an event. Everybody sits here, and then 12 months later they do the same again. I want to find a mechanism, which is why I set up Engaging Communities in Staffordshire, to start to get continuous feedback and understand what the communities look like, what the issues are in different communities, and start to get a much, much more holistic and continuous picture. How we do that on the ground, well, there's many different views to that, but above all, it's not just done for the sake of it, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you for the opportunity of answering this particular question. It is something that would be a county-wide role to represent the one person. I mean, this government did think that 17 weren't doing it, so this is one person who role getting information from everybody. That's all your concerns and everything else. So I've thought about this a lot. So on one side, I want to go out and not just visit and have public meetings in the big towns and the big areas, which will be fairly commonplace, but go out to the smaller areas on a rota as well. That won't pick up all that is affected. But having regular meetings and organised meetings with yourselves, perhaps through more organised ways through VAST and SKIO, because there's, as you said, over 3,000 of you across the whole area, and doing that, and having some mechanisms working with you to find out how you want to be consulted, makes better sense to me. I mean, we've all got emails, so if there's anything that needs more urgent responses, we can always use that. But to my mind, there's nothing better than meeting you all face to face on a regular basis. Maybe not all 3,000, unless there's a specific topic we need to drill down to. If it's too many people, we can work with overarching groups. But I've given a lot of thought to this, and having mechanisms in place, and having commissioning units, and making more use of the police communications department as a whole, does come to mind. Thank you.
We perhaps have time just for one question in this particular section about working with the community groups in the voluntary sector. Is there anybody that would like to ask a follow-up question? If not, you can ask it at the end. It's just, we've got time now. Okay, we'll move on to the next. The next subject that I want to cover is, that's obviously come from yourselves, is listening to and supporting victims. And I think we've got a hand up somewhere in the audience here. Who's got a question?
Good morning. I'm Lena Hancock from Victim Support. My question's quite lengthy, so please bear with me. The Police and Social Responsibility Act mandates that the Police and Crime Commissioner must listen to the views of victims before producing a police plan for the area. How would you, as a PCC, ensure that the views of victims are taken into account and create confidence in the process for those who are reluctant to come forward and report incidents, including vulnerable victims and the hard-to-reach groups?
Hello, Emily. I was the first PCC candidate in Staffordshire to quite willingly sign the Victim Support 5 pledges, which was welcomed by their Chief Executive, Jack Carr, met a few weeks ago as well. The Police and Social Responsibility Act places a special responsibility on the Police and Crime Commission to listen to the views of victims before producing the policing plan for Staffordshire. That's quite right. The first plan, along with the first budget, has to be produced in a very short period of time. In addition to this, we will not know how much a victim supports policy area and money that comes with it. We have until March. It's the Home Office will be keeping control of several elements, and we won't know completely which elements until March. We know they intend to keep homicide and major offences such as rape, but after that it's not quite clear. Initially, there's unlikely to be time to set up a brand new system to fund victim support work and talking to people, setting up everything. There won't be time. You've got to gain people's confidence to consult with them first and then add it into the plan kit, which won't work. So your members are already doing this. Local authorities are already doing this. You're already working together, gathering evidence in support of your own policies and services. You already provide good value for money. It's you and not the statutory sector who are able to get to those hard-to-reach groups who are frequently underrepresented. You are independent of the statutory sector, so you are able to give the impartial advice. Your organisations are not tied to as much red tape. If you're at the council, the amount of hoops you have to get through to make a decision and get anywhere, and like Matthew said, tick box consultation, it does occur. You might say it doesn't. Unfortunately, it does, because they just don't have the time, or there's so many hoops and it just occurs. I don't think our officers ever think they're doing it that way, they're doing it with the best of intentions, but that's certainly how it feels. So you are able to work more flexibly and responsibly and in very imaginative ways. We must make best use of media. Where we have a success, for example, where victims have to show courage to give out evidence, resulting in the perpetrator being found guilty, we should publicise this. Sadly, it's far from uncommon to see prosecutions for domestic violence where the victim has suffered dozens of attacks before going to the police. That's a cycle that we've got to break. You have the experience of supporting victims and even greater potential where the police courts are having a negative effect. Victim support are already interested in exploring this further. It makes sense and could lead to an even better service. That's not to replace good police officers, that's to assist them fill in the gaps. But victims, not criminals, come first.
That's the question for me. I don't think signing a pledge is going to actually achieve anything. I think it might send a political note that you're in the gang and you believe what it's all about. I don't need to sign something, even though I did. We had a long and a very heated and interesting discussion on whether I should sign this pledge yesterday. I did in the end with a caveat that said let's just bloody well do something about it rather than just sign it. This needs ideas. Why is it that a victim cannot find out what the state of their case is? Why is it that victim support groups spend so much of their time, before they even do anything for the victim, chasing police officers around because they're on different shifts, because they can't get information? After my meeting yesterday with victim support, I went away and we've already now started to develop a Staffordshire case tracker, which will mean that individuals who are the victims of crime can actually log in and see what the real-time situation is of their particular case. It's a novel idea, it's not been done before. But this is actual new ideas. This is proper work. This is actually enabling the voluntary sector to do their work better. It's offering a more... You can post a parcel and you can log in and you can see it's going to be delivered in 23 minutes. You can see actually it's at Lincoln, it's waiting to go to the next depot. Why in 2012, if you are the victim of a crime, are you unable to find out easily, 24 hours a day, what the police have done about that crime? It's a nonsense. This is fundamental to my position and how different to Joy's position. I want to actually make changes that will make it better for the victims of crime, that will streamline the way that your services work, because you are forever beaten by the statutory sector not actually waking up and modernising. So I think something like the crime tracker, I think something like the stuff we talked about, whilst I'm very happy to sign any pledges because that's what politicians do, it's not the answer to everything. It's actually understanding what sits behind those pledges, coming up with new ideas. And that is the very essence of what the PCC is about. The other fundamental difference between our two approaches is this. If we continue doing things the way we are with less money, there will be less frontline time for police. If we continue doing things the way we are with less money, it will suffer. The service will suffer. If we modernise, if we do things more intelligently, if we learn from what business does, but do it in a compassionate, public ethos way, we can create more scope for improvements, we can improve services, and above all, we can start focusing the emphasis on the way those services are delivered towards the consumer. Because even if you are a victim of crime, you are a consumer of services, victim support services. So my view is, we get the job done, we come up with new ideas, we don't just simply rely on signing pages.
Really pleased to hear the commitment towards supporting victims. There are a number of roles out there that work in the background in supporting victims. Some of them play a very important part. And I know that Justin, earlier done, Chief Officer of Savannah, got a question with regards to one of those roles now.
Justine, thank you. How aware are you of the Independent Sexual Violence Advisor or ISVA service? The Staffordshire Moorlands, South Staffordshire, Lichfield, Tamworth and East Staffordshire ISVA service will operate until the end of March 2013. Staffordshire Women's Aid, who currently manage the helpline, and Staffordshire ISVA will not be able to take referrals after these areas in December 2012, except for Cannock and Stafford, where they have funding in place until 2015. The Newcastle Underline ISVA, currently funded by Arch, will cease from the 28th of this month. Arch are not sure at this stage whether they will be replacing the position, but it is clear that no more referrals are being accepted and we do not know where the existing clients will be going. Meanwhile, the clients continue to contact both Savannah, who currently provide ISVA service for Stoke-on-Trent, and Children and Male ISVA for Staffordshire, and the Staffordshire Helpline and the Newcastle area. What do you as the PCC intend or have in terms of priority and provision for this service, as the current Staffordshire-wide Sexual Assault Referral Centre continues to refer cases?
Okay, yeah, sure. I don't know the detail of what you do. Clearly, I've read about what you do. It seems on the face of it to be very sensible and very good. The easy thing for me to do, and I've never done it in the 3 years that I've been involved with this, I could easily say, yes, brilliant, I'll give you all the money for the next 3 years, not a problem at all. That's the easy option. What I really do think is that I need to look at what you do. I need to understand whether it meets the service in the way that victims want that service meeting. I need to understand whether it can be improved. I need to understand, as I ask every group that I meet, what is the first thing that if you had a utopian wand, what would you change tomorrow? And what is the thing that frustrates you most with the system? And I think that's a very good place to start off, to start to understand and assess whether you're providing the right services, whether you can provide them better. So I don't know is the simple answer. I'm not going to make a commitment because I don't know enough about the service. What you will get from me is straight talking. What you will get from me is if you come to me and say, look, whatever happens in the future, we have to maintain this for the next 3 to 6 months while you've got time to understand how we perform, etc., etc. Well, that to me seems like a pragmatic view. One thing I will not do is to promise one thing in the room and do something different out of it.
Very good question. Until we get the books on our laps on November the 22nd, I don't think either of us can totally honestly guarantee how much extra money or money we can dig out and find, at that until that time. But I know very well the sort of works those organisations do, and I know the success of the SARC in Cambridge is already bringing in more people referring. Vera Bear did a very good report not long ago on this very issue, very detailed report, and she's still continuing with that report. And the very heart of it is how this government has taken away the funding from organisations and councils and put the responsibility into councils for these roles, and in fact the funding you, and then they cut the funding and expect these organisations to still continue giving the same service. It isn't on. So I'm not going to promise the funding right now that I can't possibly give, but I can tell you right now it's a serious priority. Where I live in Stoke-on-Trent, and the part of Stoke-on-Trent where I grew up, I used to see on a almost daily basis the issues and problems around women. Where I was brought up wasn't that far from the Cambridge red light area, so I see and saw abused women. I knew by sight people and women who were abused. from that profession going to people who have been abused in their own homes and any other way, it's a big thing. Equally, when I represented the Cambridge part of the area, I didn't just end up signposting to Savannah, I was signposting to Carmen and Barn and others as well in that field. So there's vast networks of yourself. Now we might have to look at seeing how some of it, the contracting can be streamlined in some way to get the best out of it for yourselves. But it is a priority of mine, and from November 22nd, if I am elected, I won't just be looking at it briefly, I'll be looking at it in depth. It is one of the figures that the police are really struggling to get convictions on. I mean, they were doing just over 21%, so they set the target a little higher. It was actually the target they were reaching 21% convictions and resolutions, and set it to 31, now it's going back again. And this Staffordshire Police is one of the best performing police in the country, by none, it really is. So if we're only getting those sort of levels, I really would not want to have areas where the worst performing police are, because that expectation is what their expectation is, I don't know. So come November 22nd, I'll sit down with groups and see where we can go with that.
And there are a vast array of crime categories that affect victims, and some affect more than others. I know there are some specific categories that raise concern with some agencies. And we have a question from David Ward from Mencap.
Hi, I'm David Ward from Mencap. If you were elected, what would you do to combat crime, hate crime, against people with all disabilities?
Good morning, David. I have quite a history of standing up for hate crime in general, actually, and especially. And what does concern me about hate crime around disabled people, especially anything to do with Mencap and mine and anything like that, is people don't sometimes realise that that person has got those sorts of problems. There was a board I noticed outside when I came in about signing up for the police, understanding the issues and problems when they're arresting somebody. There's been history of people being arrested where the police are thinking that they're doing something illegal or chatting back or whatever, or being drunk, when they're not. It's part of their, their issues and their problems and themselves, their complexities, because we're all complex. So the list, when I read down it just outside the door there, I have no problem taking that list on board. Pledges are not just there to be signed, you take them on board, whatever Matthew says. I won't sign a pledge unless I agree with them. That list out there, eminently sensible, and I do know that the Intruria model in Stoke-on-Trent, the police are having a nurse there, which is not just an ordinary nurse, she's a mental health nurse, because you only have to see that people arrested go through the courts, and so many people have got so many issues that are not recognised and end up in our prisons for our prison services to sort out. So those issues are very important. Just on the hate crime thing in the wider field, it's amazing how we've just gone through the Paralympics and everybody's seen the great things. But the negative on that is on how we're also, on the benefit system, everybody's being pushed through to, if they can twitch a muscle, then they should be able to get a job, even if the week's from dying, whatever it is. And on the back of that, people are expecting, strangely, disabled people to be able to do some of the things the Paralympians do, because they can do it. So, and it's really not on. I think actually we need to be able to get the message out in a wider way, using all the different things we can do, all different medias. To be honest, make the most use of the media that's around here today and at other times, because as these elections build up, ask those questions on a regular basis, get the media to ask those questions, because you've got the eyes and ears of the national media, BBC, ITV and everybody else at the moment. Ask those questions. On general hate crime, I do have a very strong history on that. One of the reasons myself and I met was because of that. I've been a member of various anti-fascist groups and all that sort of thing, North Carlton, Stoke-on-Trent. I have given evidence in court more recently against a BMP member for absolutely outrageous comments, not just the ones that you read on Twitter. The actual comments have been taken off his site, and they were absolutely outrageous. And that was last year when he posted it up. It's just taken a while to come through to Crown Court.
Thanks, Shelley.
Even the attacks I've had, I would still do it again. yeah, and I am having attacks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I separate it out into two areas actually? First of all, sadly I don't think we'll ever get rid of it. I think we have to be really practical about that. So I think that the courts need to come down much heavier on it than they perhaps done in the past. Secondly, I think the police need to identify earlier some of the tragedies that have happened across the UK are because an event which looks like an isolated event has not been connected to other events which has sadly ended up with real tragedy. So it's about identifying things. First part of what Joyce said, I absolutely agree with. So that's two things today. I really do think that one of the big issues as far as the police are concerned is they spend too much time actually trying to deal with things that do require specialist mental health issues, specialist learning disability help. And so I think one of the things that we have to do strategically, as part of a structured service, is to make sure that professionals are available 24/7. So that when the police do come across somebody who has some challenges, has some life challenges, whatever they might be, there is an array of professional support to be able to do that. And actually, that would save considerable finance and time, because the number of police officers that I've spoken to who have spent 6, 8, 10, sometimes entire shifts dealing with an individual situation which was outside their expertise, but as the police service, they were the ones there trying to deal with it. So I think there's some structural changes that we can make. Hate crime in general. We've done some work in the county part of Staffordshire called Citizen Watch, and that was about getting the private sector, the commercial sector, the voluntary sector, all working together to be able to give safe havens as far as individuals who feel threatened, individuals who feel in fear of either intimidation or worse, to be able to go into these places where there are individuals trained on the premises to go through a number of steps to make them feel better, to contact the police or contact other agencies. So again, words are great. This is about running schemes out. This is about new ideas which will physically and practically make a difference.
Thank you. Before we just move on from this section of the listeners' support for victims, are there any specific questions you'd like to come back to the candidates about? To say we will hopefully have time at the end of the things you can't think of at this moment. If that's the case, I intend to move on to the next section, and quite clearly in the media there's a lot of things put about the challenges that police forces face. And I think Dave Benge from the Third Sector Development Manager has got a question for you.
Okay, my name is Dave Benge from Skier. The police force has seen significant cuts to its budget, which has seen a reduction in the number of police officers. As Police and Crime Commissioner, how will you ensure that the service given to keep our communities safe is not left vulnerable due to these cuts?
We can use technology better. Joy has made great play of my thoughts on the famous iPad. I'll clarify that I'm talking about a tablet. iPad is the name that people understand as one of these thin things that you can carry around and do stuff on. Why in Staffordshire does it take 3 times longer to process statements than it does in Hampshire? Why on earth does it take so much longer and so many more handovers? Why do we still do something in the year 2012? Where, broadly speaking, if you're a witness to a crime or a witness to an incident, you go to the police station and you sit down and the police officer in front of you writes longhand all the stuff that's going on. And this happened to me before Christmas, way before I was involved with this. And I happened to say to the police officer after I'd been there for over an hour as a witness to a road rage incident, what happens to that now? He said, you wouldn't believe it. The processes need improving. We need to use technology. The analogy of the iPad, which I stand by, even though it's been made fun of, is that instead of sitting there with a biro and a pad or a pen and pad or whatever, let's get into the year 2012. Let's do what other forces do, where you make a statement on something similar to an iPad and tablet. You sign the bottom of it, just the same as you do when you receive a parcel at the door, just the same as you do when you now do stuff as far as going to the airport is concerned. You press a button and it saves you 4 hours of police time. It's not difficult to do. very difficult sometimes for big organisations to say we've invested in new systems which aren't quite right. They aren't quite as ambitious as they should have been. But it's not difficult to streamline the system. Project B3K, which is the first big policy I came up with, I believe can release 3,000 more hours of police time onto the front line every single week, the equivalent to 70 officers. And that's at a conservative view. If you actually work the figures out, it works out as 5,000. The answer to the question is, you do things differently. It goes back to what I said earlier. If we keep doing things the way we keep doing them, and we've got less money to do it, there will be a reduction in services. There will be less police officers on the front line. If we do things in a different way, a more intelligent way, a more modern way, we use technology in the way it's meant to be used, we can actually absorb many of these reductions in budget, and we can actually get more police officers on the front line. So I'm not as negative as some are, because we've done much of this in social care. We've proved that it works. We've proved that you can either take the opportunity route, and bear in mind this idea of police arresting somebody, going to the police station, throwing them to another group of police officers who process them, and then get back out onto the street. So that it's my only mention of the previous government, and it's because chief inspectors and officers are saying this is what's happening. It's opportunists. They bung people into the police station and then get back out on the street so they can say we've got more police officers on the front line. When in reality, by the time there's been 3 handovers, by the time there's been 2 callbacks because the handover wasn't quite right, in reality it would be faster and quicker to have the police officer who made the arrest see it right the way through to hand him over to the prison van. It would save 1.5 hours, but the perception, which is what some are only bothered about, is that the police officers are getting out and about again. So it's about being realistic. It's about saying, actually, things that we've tried, which look like a good idea, don't work. It's about doing what any normal good business would do, which is to say, this is the real situation, we now need to change it because it hasn't worked. So in answer to your question, David, I'm utterly confident that we can not only absorb the pressures that there are on the police financially because of budget cuts. I think over the next 4 years we can absorb those and we can still get more officers and more time on the front line, because I think we've gone too far away from the reassurance that Bobbies on the beat actually give. The academics will say Bobbies on the beat doesn't cut crime, but it does make the public feel more secure, and I think it must deter crime to some degree.
Thank you, Dave. The central challenge facing the police are the 20% cuts, which in my view go too far, too fast and too deep. I mean, HMIC's own figures in Staffordshire say that we lose about 395 police officers, 25 PCSOs and 400 other staff, that's the staff that support our police officers. So some of our police officers are already having to do some jobs that they're not necessarily trained to do because those roles have gone, and therefore it's taking them longer to do them because it's not their specialism. You know, it's not that they don't know how to do it necessarily, but files when we get to court are sometimes got a bit missing, quite right, because the specialist clerk that brought all the files together for court would have known exactly what to do, done it in a timely manner, prepared it. That sort of thing is starting to slip and show already. I will work with the Chief Constable to identify efficiency savings where they can be found. I'd also ensure that all tenders and contracts for services are written to get the best value and will make full use of economies of scale. I'd encourage more Staffordshire residents to become special constables, or to help with staffing at police posts in rural villages. They were quite successful in those places. I will oppose the privatisation of police services. I'll tell you one reason why, or 2 reasons why. The first reason is if you privatise a section, you've got a contract in place for what, 10, 15 years, because that's how long those contracts generally run. And then you've got more cuts to your budgets. Well, you can't touch that area. You've got a contract, it could cost you a fortune to touch that area, which means that instead of spreading thinly a load across areas. You have to pile it onto the areas that you've got left into your control. So that's not safe, because keeping the public perception that they are safe is very, very important, as you were all aware. The other thing is, when I met with the IPCC, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, they made it very clear that when they have a private company staff in somewhere where they do investigations, they can't demand that that person complies with their request for information. They can have police and police staff, but not with private company staff. It makes it very difficult in sorting out complaints that make it either more lengthy or they just don't get to the bottom because of that problem. I will ensure that many police officers as possible are out in our neighbourhoods because public confidence is important. They do not need to be stuck behind a desk. Up to 2010, there was a 30% drop in crime across Staffordshire, but worryingly, the latest figures show that force performance is beginning to decline, and this cannot be separated from the cuts. It's important that the force continues, as it's already doing, to invest in IT. Cars are already going to be having laptops in so that you can actually take the statement on the road and not have to keep running back to the office. And I do know, both as a person who was burgled in 1998, the difference from then to now, where I've been recently giving statements in different ways, and in statements I've given over several years on other issues. Only, not this Saturday before, I gave a statement in a police station, straight onto a computer, typed off, signed, done. There was no palaver, no problems, no broken ballpoint pens, no iPads required to cost £1.1 million or the equivalent of 34 police officers. It's done, it was dusty, no problems. So I believe in continuing to invest in IT. It can save us all money and time in the future. So to gain any efficiency savings which can be found this way, I would fully support. As a group, Labour Police and Crime Commissioners would use their mandate from the electorate to demand fairer resources from the government and the Home Office. We are this particular government's flagship policy. They can't allow us to fail. So we have a very, very powerful voice with government. With 41 of us covering the vast majority of England and Wales, except for London areas. So there's a powerful voice there, and the message, if anybody wants to, debate and argue, make a point about these deep cuts on November the 15th, it's very important to make that clear there. Okay. I know we've got one more line. Yeah. I was just going to say, you all have lots of experience and know-how, and you already work alongside the police and community safety partnerships. And I can see an expanded role for the third sector in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned within your answer to that question the word privatisation. I know that has concerns for some of the audience. I think, Trent James, we have in the audience who has a question with regards to that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm glad we've gone on to what we're here for, to discuss the police, because the volunteers are essential in our communities, but they can't arrest anybody. At the end of the day, we rely on the police to arrest, we rely on the police to prosecute. Our volunteers do a wonderful job, but I've heard today already, where we've heard, and you've all been listening, Canada said he'll make changes, the other lady says she'll stay the same. At the end of the day, the police force at the moment isn't good enough. But I want assurances to be given today that if you're elected, the present police force will maintain and not become privatised. And one of the reasons I'm saying that, the lady just mentioned the Olympics. We had a firm brought in to secure the Olympics. It failed. Privatisation is a failure in some aspects. It's good in others. So I'm hoping for assurances from both candidates that it will not be privatised. Thank you.
Yeah, I have no problem in arranging meetings and having organisations like yourselves in that type of, I didn't use the word outsourcing because of that reason, because you were involved in working with us already. Privatisation, I particularly use that word because exactly the reasons you just said. G4S had a major problem. Not only was the army called in, on top of the police we were already sending down to London, we had to send even more police from this area. So, I mean, they did a fantastic job down there, but that's not the point. The point is it left you bereft of cover up here. And you're right, a PCSO or a volunteer has no more rights than you or I to arrest, just a citizen's arrest warrant, that's all. You need a warrant card carrying officer on those streets. Matthew's wrong when he says bobbies on the street don't count. They do count. They see anything on the streets, they can arrest you on the spot. They can do a lot more than we can. They've got batons, they've got sprays, they can do whatever they need to do. So I would never, and to be honest, you can't privatise a warrant card carrying officer, but you can privatise some of their functions, and that will seriously worry if anybody can even consider that. Except for all those reasons I said before about the contracts limiting, and I don't see why we should put our money into somebody else's profit. Our money can be spent wisely. Is there any money left over? And I'm not going to keep things as they are. I do want to be limited as well, but I'm not going to say that we're going to privatise everything because we won't. Not for me.
Well, there's a couple of things I'd just like to mention. I mean, first thing is either a rhetorical question you might allow Joy to answer it, but I haven't heard one new idea of innovation come out of Joy today about anything because it's not under the script. Secondly, as far as I'm concerned, the issues of ICT which you mentioned, I'm sorry, I've got to just answer something with the previous question. Joy, the tough book ICT process that you say you've been so closely involved in is now being stopped by the police at my request. If I can just give you a very quick analogy, this is how ludicrous some things are. The laptops that the police are looking to purchase at £5,500 each are called tough books. They are military grade almost. You can throw them up walls, you can stamp on them, you can drive over them in cars, and they won't break. Do they do any more than the thing you can buy from PC World for 250 quid? No, they don't. They are armour-plated, they will withstand a car running over them. But a very simple solution I have, which is a bit innovative, it's a bit different to the way that you think, and the reason the police have actually stopped that procurement for the time being, is I said, go and buy them from PC World, give them to the coppers, tell them not to break them more than 20 times and be careful. Oh. It's about not seeing everything as just being special and needing to have lots and lots of money thrown at it. And by the way, your issue about privatisation, I've said very clearly, one, because it's illegal, and two, because it's wrong, no warranted officer can and would ever be privatised. I'm only interested in who can do the best job at the best value for money. G4S are a joke. The performance that they did for the Olympics was chronic, but I think that was very badly commissioned. Who in their right mind with a business brain would put everything to one company like that? It was a nonsense. And just in your question, with regard to your comment about them not being held to account, there's a thing called a contract, which at the end of it you pay money for. Some people said that we couldn't raise the quality of care services in Staffordshire because the national legislation didn't allow it. Well, actually, if you put in the contract, if you put in the commission what you expect from them, and the only way they're going to get their money is to actually do that, you don't need the law. You can say to any company that you employ under a commission by the police, part of the terms are that you open yourselves up to the same scrutiny as every other part of the service. And if you don't want to do that, fine, go get money elsewhere. So it's nonsense. It is sheer nonsense to say that it's not possible to do. On the wider issue of privatisation, I don't believe that it's sensible for police divers to cost 3 times the amount that you can hire a company in to use in the meantime. I don't believe it's sensible for police divers to spend 76% of their time waiting to get a call. So there are areas where I think you can be sensible. But I've made a pledge many times, which Joy forgets every single time, and I will make it again. As far as I'm concerned, any decision-making role, any role that can affect somebody's liberty, any role that can affect somebody's freedom, will be carried out by a warranted officer. And by the way, there are volunteers that can actually have full police powers. They're called special constables. And you mentioned them in the first place.
managed to get them stopped, said all this about it. So the very next morning I checked all these facts with DCC Paxton, and he was actually quite astounded. He was really astounded. This particular one, as you say, is worth just over $5,500. He said, well, actually, Joe, we very quickly said we're going to trial that one. We're trialling a £750 one and a £2,500 one. He says, and don't forget, we need them to be robust because we don't want to spend lots of money with smashed computers trying to get evidence off them later. It isn't just a matter of being penny wise and pounds foolish. You've got to think of getting the evidence back off these laptops afterwards. So they're trialling the £750 and £2,500 ones. The only delay in the decision making over which one of those twos we are having is the purdah period, which is the election period when they can't sign contracts starting in the middle of next month. They are already signing this week the contracts for the software and the rest of the computerisation to do it. There will be about 200 of these to go into cars so that you can do exactly what we're doing to continue to innovate and take forward. And it's already budgeted, it's in the present year's budget, and it's an extortionate cost, even to my mind, buying that much for a laptop, where you can see exactly why they've tested them and exactly why they needed them. And like some other comments from that night, Matthew, DCC Paxton and ACC Sawyers were particularly aggrieved to hear what you said.
Can I just come on that back on that? That's really a point. I've got to actually clarify this. Two things. I will look you in the eye when I say it. Mr. Paxton stopped that because they saw what I was saying. They absolutely stopped that because they saw what I was saying. I think that one of the issues with police, and they do a cracking job on the front line, but they're not business people. They do a cracking job on the front line. What you're saying is true about the software, and I've made it entirely clear that come November the 15th, if I decide that that's the wrong thing to do, I will reverse it. Because I think that they are going down the wrong path. They are actually, the police's idea of innovation, when it comes to things like ICT and other stuff, in my own view, and I have some experience in this, in my own view, is to really push the boundaries of that. Whereas I'm saying, why don't we actually look at doing it a completely different way? Why don't we get rid of the boundaries? Instead of actually buying a bigger horse, why don't we move to a combustion engine? So there are elements of what you say which are correct, elements which are not correct, but whatever happens after November 15th, if it's not a sustainable, future-proof way of doing it, and if it's not the way so many other forces have proved that it works, which it's not, I will stop it, because it is a waste of money.
Okay, thank you very much to both Joy and Matthew. We're going to take a break now for coffee. If we can be back here for just after past, please. I appreciate it's fairly quick, but there's a lot of questions still to be asked. Thanks very much.